Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, we share the most incredible true survival stories from around the world. Before we dive into today's absolutely mind-blowing story, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps us bring you more amazing content like this. And if you enjoy what you hear today, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and let us know in the comments what survival story you'd like us to cover next. Now picture this. You're trapped on a frozen mountain ledge, 10,000 feet above sea level. No food, no fire, no hope of rescue. The temperature is plummeting, your feet are turning blue, and you haven't eaten anything but snow for over a month. Most people would die in days, but one man survived 43 days in conditions that would kill anyone else in a week. This is the absolutely incredible true story of James Scott and how he defied death itself in the most remote mountains on Earth. In 1991, 22-year-old James Scott had everything going for him. He was a top medical student in Australia, engaged to the woman of his dreams, and about to fulfill his elective requirement at a hospital in Nepal. James wasn't just book smart, he was physically formidable. A black belt in karate, he'd won the Queensland Championships and placed third nationally. He worked out 6 times a week and could handle himself in any situation, or so he thought. After arriving in Kathmandu in September, James had months to kill before his hospital placement began. Local doctors suggested he explore the Himalayas. After all, he was practically at the doorstep of Mount Everest. For an adventure-seeking medical student, this was the chance of a lifetime. James and Tim completed their first trek easily, maybe too easily. The September weather was mild, and they encountered other hikers in just ski jackets and sneakers. They felt so overprepared that they sent their guide and extra gear back to Kathmandu. This decision would soon prove to be a fatal mistake. Riding high on their successful first trek, James and Tim planned another adventure, this time in late December, winter in the Himalayas. But their previous success had given them dangerous overconfidence. They packed light, just what could fit in their backpacks. On December 21st, they set out on the Halembo Trail, but quickly changed course after meeting German hikers who recommended the more challenging Goseinkon Trail instead. They picked up a solo Australian trekker named Mark Fulton, and the 3 men headed toward what they thought would be another routine adventure. But then disaster struck in multiple ways. Tim injured his leg and had to turn back. In the confusion of their goodbye, James accidentally gave Tim the only detailed map they had, keeping an outdated, useless one for himself. Tim also forgot to hand over their only lighter. James and Mark pressed on alone, carrying obsolete maps and no way to start a fire. They had no idea they were walking into one of the worst Himalayan storms in years. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, James and Mark woke up to a light dusting of snow. The lodgekeeper assured them the weather would hold. At 7:30 a.m., they set out on what should have been a routine day of hiking. Within hours, everything changed. Dark clouds rolled in like a wall of death. The temperature plummeted, then came the snow, not the light flakes they'd seen before, but massive, blinding precipitation that dumped 5 inches in minutes. The trail vanished completely. James and Mark somehow ended up separated by a creek, shouting for 15 minutes before they could find each other. James wanted to turn back, but Mark was confident he could find the path forward. In a decision that would haunt James forever, they split up. Mark continuing ahead, James attempting to retrace his footsteps. But the snow was falling so hard that their footprints were already gone. Within an hour, James faced a terrifying reality. He was completely lost in the middle of a blizzard, thousands of feet up in the Himalayas with no map, no fire, and no hope of rescue. Following what he thought was a creek towards civilization, he found himself trapped in an increasingly narrow valley with walls closing in around him. And then he saw it. The creek ended at 100-foot waterfall with no way down. Going back meant certain death in the storm. Going down was impossible. That left only one option: up. Remember, James was terrified of heights. He wasn't a climber. But with hypothermia setting in and the storm raging, he had no choice. For 2 hours, he climbed from ledge to slippery ledge, sometimes hanging on by just his fingertips, fighting against ice, snow, and his own terror of falling. When he finally reached the top, he collapsed in exhaustion. But somehow, miraculously, he found a small rocky overhang, barely enough shelter to keep him alive, but shelter nonetheless. That night, drawing on his medical training, James made a counterintuitive but life-saving decision. He stripped completely naked in sub-zero temperatures, dried every inch of his body with his towel, and put on dry clothes. Being cold and dry, he reasoned, was infinitely better than being cold and wet. This decision probably saved his life. What James thought would be a temporary shelter became his home for the next 43 days. He had no food except 2 chocolate bars that were gone within days. No fire. Remember, Tim had kept their only lighter. No way to signal for help, just a sleeping bag, the clothes on his back, and 4 books he'd brought to read in the lodges he'd never reach. The hunger was overwhelming at first. He dreamed about food constantly, his body consuming itself to survive. But after 2 weeks of eating nothing but snow, something strange happened. The hunger began to fade. Drawing on his karate training, he learned to meditate through the pain, focusing on martial arts techniques and sequences to keep his mind occupied. But his body was failing. His feet went completely numb. When he removed his boots one day, they were completely blue. He took out medical scissors from his kit and jabbed them into his foot. It bled freely, but he felt absolutely nothing. The frostbite was so severe, he was sure he'd lose both feet if he somehow survived. Then came the bear. James was jolted awake one afternoon by horrifying animal screams. 100 feet away, he saw a large black figure emerge from the brush, a massive Himalayan black bear, and it had spotted him. In what he later called a moment of complete insanity, James grabbed his medical scissors, his only weapon, and shouted at the bear to come down and attack him. He wanted a quick end rather than the slow death of starvation and hypothermia. The bear, startled by this skeletal madman screaming at it, fled up the slope. But for the next 5 nights, James heard it prowling around his shelter, waiting to be attacked, clutching scissors against a creature that could kill him instantly. Meanwhile, back in Australia and Nepal, a desperate search was underway. James's sister Joanne had flown to Nepal to coordinate rescue efforts. Multiple search teams had entered the mountains and been turned back by conditions. Some got lost themselves. After 3 weeks, hope was fading fast. In desperation, Joanne followed the advice of a local woman and consulted a Buddhist Lama, a spiritual leader who locals claimed could see what others couldn't. The Lama studied a map of the search area, prayed briefly, then placed his finger on a specific triangle of land formed by 3 villages. "Look there," he said. "That's where you'll find him." Mountain experts scoffed. There wasn't even supposed to be a route leading to that area. But when they finally located James's hiking partner, Mark, he confirmed he and James had separated exactly where the Lama had pointed, in the middle of that impossible triangle. On day 30, James heard something that made his heart race, the distant sound of helicopter rotors. He stumbled from his shelter, waving his sleeping bag frantically, even dropping his pants to reveal bright red long underwear that might be visible from the air. The helicopter circled for minutes before disappearing. James was crushed. 12 days later, on his 42nd day in hell, he heard the sound again. With the last of his strength, he waved his sleeping bag for 20 minutes until he collapsed from exhaustion. This time, the helicopter stayed longer, circling directly overhead before flying away. James knew he'd been seen. He also knew it would take rescuers 4 days to reach him on foot, and he was certain he'd be dead by then. But he was wrong. The next day, lying in his sleeping bag, James heard voices. He was sure he was hallucinating, the final stage before death. But when he whistled weakly through his teeth, a whistle came back. Two rescuers crawled under his rocky shelter, and when they confirmed his identity, they hugged and kissed him with joy. One of them looked at this skeletal survivor and said, "You're a god. No one has ever lived in this part of the Himalayas for more than 10 days." James Scott had survived 43. When the helicopter lifted him out the next morning, he was barely recognizable, gaunt, bearded, weighing probably 40 pounds less than when he'd started. His sister Joanne ran to embrace him, and for a moment they held each other in disbelief. James Scott had achieved the impossible. He'd survived longer in the high Himalayas than anyone in recorded history, armed with nothing but medical knowledge, martial arts discipline, and an absolute refusal to give up. And incredibly, the rescuers found him in exactly the spot the Buddhist Lama had pointed to on the map. A reminder that sometimes survival requires more than just skill and determination. Sometimes it requires a miracle. What an absolutely incredible story of human resilience and the will to survive. James Scott's 43-day ordeal in the Himalayas truly shows us what the human spirit is capable of when pushed to its absolute limits. If this story amazed you as much as it did us, please show your support by hitting that like button. It means the world to us and helps more people discover these incredible true stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest survival stories. We have so many more unbelievable tales to share with you. Drop a comment below and let us know, what would you have done in James' situation? Could you have survived 43 days in those conditions? We love reading your thoughts and theories. Your support keeps this channel going and allows us to bring you the most fascinating survival stories from around the globe. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, the human spirit is capable of incredible things.